Hi nerds, my name is Dasha. Welcome to the dossier. I'm sure you've come across the problem of not having all the information about fashion collections being chronologically arranged online. I'm here to save you. Fashion in 5 is going to be a show where we discuss 5 years of fashion, and the structure is going to be divided into three parts: industry and creative milestones, cultural and historical context, and finally, key collections and fashion moments. Why you want to watch this video? You want to watch this video because we're going to have a visual representation of a timeline so that you can remember one by one, chronologically, how the events happened and what happened, which can be useful. Without any further ado, let's get into it. We're starting with the year 2000, the industry and creative milestones. First of all, we've got Eddie Slimane, who leaves YSL and becomes creative director at Dior in January. And then we've got Alexander McQueen, who sells 51% stake of his brand to Gucci Group, now known as Kering. There were a lot of tensions around this because some people say that he did that to spite LVMH. But if you know, you know. Cultural and historical context. We've got the Y2K scare, which is really cute nowadays because basically when the year 2000 hit, people thought that all computers, all technology would crash. Didn't, I guess. Then we've got the notion of the new millennium, which obviously is going to follow us around in these 5 years that we're going to discuss. At the start of each new millennium, there's a belief in prosperity, in the positivity of newness. People believe in a bright and prosperous future for the next millennium, I guess. And this was highlighted by the internet becoming mainstream. Google was created in 1998. Style.com was launched in the year 2000 and fall. So people have a lot more information to work with, which makes their lives more fulfilling, I suppose. And then we've got the multiculturalness of everything, to be honest. Globalization is on the rise. People are learning about more cultures, and this is really reflected itself in fashion, which we'll see further. Now, on to key collections and fashion moments. I'm going to look at the shows chronologically. You know how fashion shows work, right? So, for example, if the collection is Spring Summer 2000, it was presented in September 1999. So, yeah, I'm going to place all of them chronologically, and I'm going to go by the collection and not by the actual date, even though I will mention the actual date for our timeline. Okay, so now on to key collections and fashion moments. I just wanted to mention the few themes that were really popular in the fashion industry at that time. So the general topics in fashion back then were challenging traditional silhouettes. Margiela and Comme des Garçons is a really good example. We've got romanticizing the exotic. You'll see a lot of it. And Galliano and McQueen are really good examples of that. Then we've got embracing celebrity image because of the rise of the internet, obviously. Versace and Tom Ford used a lot of that in their shows. And finally, we've got futuristic minimalism with Prada and Helmut Lang. The first show we're going to talk about today is Versace Spring Summer 2000. It was presented in September 1999. Why the show was interesting is because with this show, Donatella Versace established herself as a creative director, moving away from the kind of darker tones of previous seasons and coming on with vibrant and tropical vibes, which in terms of clothes, we've got draped dresses, Grecian style gowns, handkerchief blouses, tailored pantsuits and jackets. So all in all, it's really sexy, youthful, and playful without being too much, if you know what I mean. Models are tan, they've got carefree hair. It's like they're coming from the beach, it's Mediterranean summer season. Just a really positive show in general. Side note, Jennifer Lopez wore the jungle dress, the one with the low slit to the belly button, to the 42nd Grammys Awards. And because it was so popular, people really wanted to see it. That made Google invent Google image search, which is a fun fact. Number 2 is Raf Simons, Spring Summer 2000, Summa Cum Laude, that was presented in January 2000. Summa Cum Laude by itself, it means with highest honor from Latin. And it traditionally links to academic excellence. So this show is kind of striking because Raf Simons juxtaposes the world of academia with youth subculture, which is usually what happens when a kid goes to private school. On weekends he goes and parties in some basement in ripped clothes. When I'm talking about youth subcultures, Gabber culture was specifically what he was thinking about, which is like hardcore techno stuff from Belgium and the Netherlands. In terms of clothes, we've got minimalist designs that emphasize the torso, bombers, traditional suiting elements with streetwear. So, yeah, just like I said before, academia with techno, and we've got the mix of that in this show. Next, we've got Maison Martin Margiela, La Mode du XXL, Fall Winter 2000, presented in March. Mr. Martin is one of my favorites, so I might blabber on about him for ages, but you're gonna have to deal with that simply. So here we've got a seminal exploration of scale, anonymity, and deconstruction, which are, as we all know, obviously, the main topics that Martin uses in his brand. It's his ethos. The sizing labels in the show were 74 to 78, which is massive and it's far beyond standard garment sizes. So he explored the concept of clothing serving to the body and not the other way around, which I love that. Despite of the size, the garments still have a sort of sense of refinement. In terms of clothing, we've got massive garments, deconstruction and repurposing, we've got visible seams, we've got raw edges and unconventional closures. There's a play on volume. In terms of symbolism, again, if you know who Margiela is, he keeps a constant theme throughout his career, with certain tweaks obviously for every show, but this is really classic Martin. So model faces were obscured and the garments lacked branding. This was done in order to focus attention on form and structure rather than designer identity or celebrity endorsement or association. This collection's emphasis on handmade things and imperfection process really contrasted with the polished and commercial fashion that was obviously prevalent in that period of time. Go, Mr. Martin. Alexander McQueen, Voss. Spring Summer '01, presented in September 2000. I'm going to talk a lot about Alexander McQueen because I knew that he was an icon before, but I also watched a documentary on him recently, and I'm just in awe of the man, so be prepared, please. Thank you. Alexander McQueen has a notorious trajectory of pushing fashion's boundaries beyond clothing into performance art, which obviously, if you watch any of his shows, A, they have a name, B, they have a theme. So he doesn't just create clothing, he needs to put them in context, which is fascinating. The set in this show. So you've got a giant mirrored cube. The audience is sat around it. The cube reflects, okay, so the audience can only see themselves. The show began with 1.5 hours of pure silence, which is kind of a psychological tactic to unsettle the audience. When the show began, the cube reversed, so the audience could see into the cube, but the models who were in the cube couldn't see outside. And what was revealed, do you think? Right, an asylum padded room. The girlies love the aesthetic nowadays of mental illness. This showcases a sort of reversal of the gaze. So the people who came to observe were being observed at the start of the show, obviously. It's a sort of critique on voyeurism, on vanity, and the fashion industry's obsession with beauty and image. This show showcases women being critiqued for resorting to nonconformity and making entrapment. So yeah, women walking around the cube that looks like a insane asylum. Probably, the explanation is quite straightforward. The clothing is beautiful, right? We've got symmetry, we've got beautiful disjointed tailoring, we've got exposed corsetry. There's a really heavy use of mummification. If I'm not mistaken, Kate Moss was wearing a sort of like a mummified dress. So the mummification elements and the cage-like structure elements make us think of confinement, obviously, which is what he wanted to represent with the box in the first place. And we've got a big contrast of materials such as organza and metal and leather. This show had a insane finale, okay? So in the big box, you had the smaller box, but you couldn't see inside the smaller box. During the finale, the smaller box collapses and it reveals performance artist Michelle Ollie replicating Joel Peter Whitkin's photograph Sanitarium. The image of Sanitarium is crazy, but replicating it in real life, hello. So this is a kind of symbol of how society traps and kills what it deems beautiful. A metaphor for liberation, for decay, and for spectacle. I can't imagine how the people that were in the room felt in that moment. Okay, thank you. 2001, we've got quite a lot of creative milestones for this year. McQueen leaving Givenchy, and Julian McDonald replaces him there. That happened in March. Phoebe Philo gets appointed at Chloe as creative designer. Round of applause. She was design assistant at Chloe since 1997 to Stella McCartney, and now she's the boss. So we're going to talk about her later, obviously. Then we've got the first full Eddie Slimane collection for Dior Homme, which happened in January, and this is going to be a pivotal moment. And we've got Victoria's Secret fashion show that happened in May, which that ruined me as a child, but still a milestone, I guess. Historical context now. Unfortunately, this year we've got 9/11 to talk about. So yeah, this not only impacted the world in general, but also the fashion industry. The whole extravaganza of the new millennium was ruined by terrorists. Obviously, we've still got the it girls and the internet, people such as, Destiny's Child, Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, Juicy Couture, suits, Uggs, it girl bags, the glasses, the ones. Yeah, that's still there. Sex in the City. Sex in the City was obviously a really big point of interest in the 2000s. It still is, I guess. But it's really funny because in at least one lecture in fashion school, you're going to get a picture of Carrie Bradshaw being a consumerist and capitalist queen. So yeah, Manolo Blahnik really profited off of that, and so did many other designers. And yeah, in terms of consumerism culture, but it's a good show, I guess. Check out my super cool man coded cup. Now into shows. We're gonna start from Prada, Spring Summer '01 Ready to Wear, that was released in September 2000. In Prada right now, we're departing from romanticism and coming into a more assertive and structured aesthetic. Flowers versus like sexy 50s and 80s inspired silhouette. In this show, we had dark colors with bright accents at times. Really cute, actually. It's kind of like Office Siren aesthetic. I hate saying that, but it is Office Siren aesthetic. It's little top, flowy skirt, tiny shorts, pencil skirts, and many cinched waist were seen in this show. I would say that Mucha here was reinterpreting historical fashion through the contemporary lens. It was intellectual and it was subversive and it was new for Prada. So, good job. Obviously, we have to talk about Dior Homme by Eddie Slimane. That was Fall Winter '01 and it was called Solitaire. I don't know if I'm overdoing the French thing. That was presented in January 2001. Just for your information, I couldn't find any actual Vogue images of that, which is really, really weird. I did find a YouTube video of every look, but I don't know what that's about. Eddie Slimane introduced a radical change in the popularity of the basic original men silhouette. So again, this is his debut, and he's presenting his vision of modern masculinity in this show and in his following show. The collection was inspired by music, culture, and art, and Slimane presented a minimalist, youthful, and androgynous show. We've got slim cut pants, we've got sharp tailoring. All of this was made to elongate the figure. Buff men are not cool anymore. It's the skinny ones that are really tall. Cool thing about all of this is that like all the buttons are concealed and hidden fastenings, which obviously shows craftsmanship as well as emphasizes the minimalist bit. Long story short, business attire is no longer for the finance bros, it's for the cool skinny guys who go to clubs and take LSD. Back to Mr. Martin. So this is obviously Maison Martin Margiela, Fall Winter '01, Ready to Wear, presented in March '01. So this collection is a bit different from the other ones because it's more like a street style vibe. The locations of his shows are always so underground and cool. I'll never get over it, to be honest. Like the ones on the playground, that was one of his first ones, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so yeah, he was obviously departing from traditional runway venues and he chose a tunnel beneath one of the Paris's pont. Bridges, thank you. Clothing, we've got rock tees, high tabbies, love tabbies, and we've got silken men robes, which were repurposed as outerwear. We've got fringed dresses. This could be interpreted as a commentary on identity and the blending of cultural differences, as well as, a challenge to the traditional notion of luxury and taste. Margiela is obviously notorious for kind of challenging masculinity and femininity as they are, because that's about it. Now, Dior, obviously by John Galliano, Fall Winter 01, ready to wear. Presented in March. This is like super youthful. I feel like he was really trying to appeal to the younger audience of Dior. He went from white trash glamour, as Vogue says, to kind of raver and hip hop icons. This was a really eclectic mix that actually Vogue described as some of the most relevant clothes Dior has seen in seasons. Okay, we've got pinstripe suits with leather and floral prints, we've got neon elements, we've got leather overcoats. All of this is a blend of classic tailored wear with rave attire. We've got holographic jackets, shiny blouses that kind of added a touch of futurism, while fur translated Galliano's love for glam. The boombox bags, I see them in my dreams. They are so funny to me, but actually quite cool also. Really 2000s. Obviously, a lot of graffiti, a lot of hip hop and hippie vibes. Just the color palette can like take your eyes out, but yeah, really cool show. So this was a really important moment for Dior because Galliano brought a different segment of people of audience to Dior, which made it more youthful and appear more to youth audiences. And this kind of revitalized Dior as a brand because it was getting a bit boring. So the last show for 2001, we've got Alexander McQueen, Fall Winter '01, What a Merry-Go-Round, presented in March 2001. I also love this show because it has a lot of inspirations, which is quite interesting to just find out about. This show is clearly a sort of exploration of the darker facets of childhood. So the theme is clowns, carnivals, circuses. The character of the child catcher from Shady Shady Bang Bang, 1968. Lee literally said, we show children clowns as if they're funny. They're not, they're really scary. Additional influences were the Nosferatu film from 1922 and the cabaret culture of Germany as depicted in the film Cabaret from 1972. In terms of silhouettes, from structured military inspired coats adorned with gold braiding to bias cut dresses reminiscent of the 1920s, leather, jersey, sequins, lace, feathers, just a bit of everything. All of this enhanced the whole show theatrically. Presentation, a really big part of each Alexander McQueen show. Stage in the warehouse in London, the HQ. In the center of the room, there was a carousel that symbolized the cyclical nature of fashion. I guess that makes sense. And as the show progressed, the carousel revealed a backdrop of oversized teddies, dolls, like, broken ones, and tattered circus paraphernalia. This show is often regarded as a critical commentary on fashion's kind of non-stop relentless pace and its impact on designers. And again, if you watch the documentary, you would know that Lee really suffered from the intensity of being a creative director. This show, actually, which is a really fun fact, it marked the first appearance of the skull motif, which obviously would become emblematic of the brand later. It's cute. 2002, skipping the industry milestones this year because I have nothing to say. Cultural and historical context. Maximalism is still a big thing. MTV is on the rise. It girls are still on the rise. They're not going anywhere. My favorite net-a-porter starts getting traction. Western brands start their expansions in Asian markets, which is really interesting because they're not obviously not only doing it for revenue, but also to explore the markets a little bit so that they can adapt due to, cultural differences and things like that. Key collections for 2002. So we're starting with McQueen. Again, this is Spring Summer '02, The Dance of the Twisted Bull, presented in October '01. This is the first show after the brand has been acquired by Kering, and it's actually also his debut presentation in Paris. When a smaller brand gets acquired by a big corporation, usually the big corporations push them to make the designs more sellable and commercial, which, from what I understand, Lee had a lot of problems with. But this collection really showcased his ability to blend theatricality with wearable fashion, which is really cool and good for him, honestly. Spanish traditions reinterpreted through an avant-garde lens is not something that you hear every day. So, you're in for a ride. This collection played on the sort of dichotomy, presenting strong, structured pieces amongst softer and more fluid designs. So, in terms of clothes, we've got Matador inspired jackets, we've got flamenco dresses, corsetry, the colors red, black, and white. The really interesting bit is, the model that wore the dress with those sticks that kind of look like the, sushi sticks, whatever they're called. So these are actually called banderillas, and they're used in bullfighting, so that was a really funny and kind of niche reference, I guess. Balenciaga Spring Summer '02, ready to wear by Nicolas Guesquière, that was called Le 10, presented in October. Here, Guesquière blended utilitarian streetwear with intricate craftsmanship. He notoriously drew inspiration from Cristobal Balenciaga's archives and reimagined historical items through a contemporary lens. The collection's title, Le 10, which translates as the 10th, or the 10, pays homage to the house's original Parisian address. The collection's standout piece, in my opinion, was the slouchy army green cargo pant. It was really well fitted, considering all the models were wearing heels. Beautiful patchwork vests were the stars of the show, micro dresses and jackets made from a collage of kind of shimmering Indian vibe fabrics. This collection kind of solidified Guesquière as a visionary designer and proved that he was capable of merging kind of random elements into cohesive and structured collections. The Yves Saint Laurent show, Spring Summer '02, Haute Couture, this is the farewell show of the famous designer, happened in January. This show was presented in the Pompidou Center in Paris and marked the culmination of a 40-year career that transformed the fashion landscape. This show was a grand retrospective encapsulating the designer's most iconic pieces. Don't be terrified, but this show showcased 300 garments. So yeah, we revisited a lot of his designs, including the 1966 Mondrian dress, the 1968 safari jacket, the iconic Le Smoking tuxedo suit. We had Russian, we had Chinese, we had African motifs reflecting his kind of global perspective on the world and diverse aesthetics. This was a really amazing moment because this marked a sort of really clean finish to his career. He did a lot for fashion. He introduced trousers into women's fashion, he popularized ready-to-wear lines, and obviously he incorporated global influences into the mainstream fashion industry. Christian Dior Fall '02 by Galliano, obviously haute couture, and presented in July. So Galliano is really heavy on his inspiration and on his references. And this specific collection is inspired by his travels through Los Angeles and Mexico, which obviously resulted in kind of like a fusion of Hollywood glamour and Mexican religious iconography. Yeah, he basically fused two really different things. The collection featured ultra high platform heels, tight hobble skirts, massive coats, and parkas juxtaposed with skimpy showgirl dresses. He couldn't go without extravagant elements, which were like these feather big headpieces, reminiscent of the Hollywood's golden era. The interesting bit about this show is Galliano used padded foam, or like foam in general, in the garment construction, which was really weird for couture at that time. But yeah, this kind of emphasized his commitment to innovation as a designer. Finally, once again, Dior Homme by Eddie Slimane, Fashion Winter '02. The show is called Reflection and was presented in the summer. This collection obviously further established the aesthetic that Slimane was trying to infiltrate and cultivate. It's a fusion of short tailoring, androgynous silhouettes, and rock-inspired elements. The theme Reflection is really interesting because it delved into the themes of introspection and duality, mirroring the internal and external facets of modern masculinity. He basically did a deep dive into the exploration on masculinity. Yeah, basically tried to change everybody's minds, which good for him. He did draw inspiration from the Goethe's The Sorrows of a Young Werther novel, which basically talks about the youth and emotional expression in men. The collection also paid homage to the glam rock era, with nods to artists like David Bowie, who actually wore his stuff. The highlight of the show for me was the slim ties. I think they're really cute. 2003. In terms of industry milestones, we've got Jean-Paul Gaultier going to Hermes, which he's going to remain there from 2003 until 2010. Tom Ford announcing his exit from Gucci. Yeah. Cultural context. In March 2003, the US invaded Iraq. This led to a big rise in political consciousness in the general public, and wartime anxiety basically equals conservative spending patterns. Key collections. This time we're going to start with Victor and Rolf, and Victor and Rolf had a really interesting history as a brand as a tandem, I guess, because the first few shows they couldn't put on the runway and they had to make them as art installations. This is a fall show called the One Woman Show, presented in October 2002. This collection was conceived as kind of a retrospective of Victor and Rolf's decade long journey in fashion, reimagined through a lens of a singular muse, and the muse was Tilda Swinton. Swinton not only opened the show, but also all of the models that followed her were kind of cloned from her. They looked almost exactly like her, which was very interesting to see. So this kind of army of a one singular person blurred the lines between reality and performance, which is really cool. The clothes were really businessy, I would say. A standout piece for me was I don't even know how many, but there were a bunch of like colors from jackets. So like jackets layered on top of each other, jackets and shirts, which created a really sculptural and voluminous silhouette. Amidst the theatrical bits and pieces, there were also refined basics like white shirts, jeans, tailored suits, which grounded the collection a little bit. So yeah, this show is widely regarded as one of Victor and Rolf's iconic collections, as it encapsulated their ability to merge fashion with performance art, creating a dialogue between the garment and the wearer. Balenciaga by Nicolas Ghesquière. Spring-Summer 2003, presented in October 2002. This collection drew inspiration from the fusion of technology and nature, evident in the use of neoprene fabric and floral and tropical prints. Ghesquière explored the juxtaposition of structured silhouettes with fluid and organic motifs, creating a narrative that kind of bridged the gaps between synthetic and the natural, which is quite an interesting topic to explore in general. A lot of pieces were like the scuba diving fabric, if you know what I mean, which is kind of nice because they really fit the body. So yeah, we've got tailored separates also, and the collection featured kind of innovative tailoring techniques, combining sheer fabrics with structured garments to add depth and complexity. Louis Vuitton by Marc Jacobs, Spring-Summer 2003, presented in October 2002. So this is a really pivotal moment for Louis Vuitton because it kind of marked its evolution from a heritage luggage brand to a culturally attuned powerhouse. This collection really seamlessly blended retro silhouettes with contemporary pop art influences because the Takashi Murakami collection was there. Murakami's designs, featuring computerized prints of the little flowers and the cartoon creatures that he created, infused the classic Louis Vuitton monogram print with a fresh and a sort of a youthful energy. So basically everything was really girly and really in your face, which good for them. Then we've got Rick Owens, actually his debut in Paris Fashion Week. This was fall winter 2003 and presented in March. So yeah, this collection was Owens' first Paris show after being awarded CFDA Perry Ellis Award and securing backing from LVMH was good for him. It marked the beginning of his European chapter, cementing his position in the avant-garde sphere. The thing about Rick Owens is that the main topic that he explores in his designs is grunge, which is the combination of grunge and glamour. The vibe is post-apocalyptic. There are a lot of dystopian motives as per usual, and the idea of a kind of battle-hardened woman is a reoccurring Owens archetype, and we know damn well that he likes his models. There was asymmetric draping in the pieces. The pieces were deconstructed and evoked sort of armor and cocoons. Shaggy parkas were there with frayed edges and exaggerated hoods, a lot of metal elements. This time, actually, he had flat-soled thigh-high boots, not the massive ones, which kind of continued his rejection of traditional femininity. Finally, we've got Alexander McQueen, Fall-Winter 2003, Scanners, presented in March. Scanners. Beautiful show, once again. This is a nomadic journey across a desolate tundra, blending elements of Eurasian tribalism, punk subculture, and Japanese ceremonial dress. This show explored themes of identity, transformation, the human psyche, and the human mind, drawing inspiration from diverse cultural motifs, obviously, and McQueen's experiences, which the poor thing has gone through a lot. Garments were really sculptural, and there were really, there were a lot of stiff A-line silhouettes, reminiscent of samurai armor and Russian lacquered dolls. He used a lot of fur, a lot of leathers. I mean, the headpieces are insane, obviously. And all of that is tied together with punk influences. Long story short, he took like four different things, put them into one, and came up with a masterpiece. The runway was transformed into a snow covered wasteland with a clear wind tunnel suspended overhead. The soundtrack, it basically combined air raid sirens with pop songs. So the point of the show was that the models were battling with the wind and the snow within the tunnel, symbolizing a sort of struggle and resilience inherent in the human experience. Finally, we're coming into 2004, our last year. The main things that happened in the industry was that Tom Ford officially left Gucci, and Julian McDonnell also left Givenchy after 3 years of being creative director. In terms of context, we've still got the Iraq War happening, and there is a global economic growth. The GDP increases by 5%, which is happening because of rapid expansions of emerging markets such as China and India. And we've got the launch of Facebook, which obviously led to widespread social networking. Alexander McQueen isn't going anywhere. We're still talking about him. The last show of his that I'm going to mention in this episode is Deliverance, Spring Summer '04, presented in September '03. The presentation obviously transcended traditional runway norms as per usual because the performance was conducted as a dance competition. So this show drew direct inspiration from the They Shoot Horses, Don't They movie. The summary of the film is basically that it's portraying dance marathons of the 1930s, which were brutal, where people danced to win prize money. And this is kind of the summary of the show as well. McQueen translated this narrative into the fashion context, using the runway to depict the physical and emotional toll of relentless work and movement and competition and pursuit of confidence and pursuit of financial gain. Understandably, as the performance progressed, models became more desperate. I mean, started acting more desperate. All of that symbolized the kind of things that you go through when you do want to get to the top. Swarovski crystal adorned dresses were the stars of the show. They were frayed edges to suggest wear and tear, patchwork suits combining various fabrics, reflecting the juxtaposition of elegance and decay, as well as outfits resembling dance costumes. So, yeah, all of the pieces of clothing that were in that show kind of reflected movement and fluidity. The finale of the show featured a dancer just collapsing on stage and being carried off by McQueen and Clark, symbolizing the ultimate sacrifice in the relentless pursuit of success. Chloe Spring Summer '04, presented in October. So this show is really chic and cute, and it encapsulated her vision of effortless femininity and vintage-inspired elegance. She drew from the 70s, from the fashion of the 70s. The collection kind of blended Portobello Road's bohemian charm with Saint-Tropez's glamour. Phoebe Philo described the inspiration herself as stemming from her mother's magazines back in the 70s. And she literally just said, I thought the girls looked so gorgeous, fresh, and happy. Honestly, we all deserve that, and thank you, Phoebe. Contrasting, actually, the low-rise jeans of that time. There were a lot of high-waisted trousers, gauzy bib-front blouses, caftans and lace separates, striped tees and overalls. Really chic, really laid back ethos for this collection. By prioritizing comfort and individuality, she sort of challenged prevailing norms and offered a blueprint for modern femininity. As a designer, she really resonated with women because she understood them, at least she tried to understand them. Women really seeked authenticity in their wardrobes, and they wanted comfort as well as chicness. So Phoebe Philo was spot on with her ethos that obviously spoke to many, many women in that era. Dior, Spring '04 Haute Couture by Mr. Galliano, again, presented in January. This is an insane show. Like, this man traveled to Egypt and decided that now he needs to make an Egyptian themed show. Hello? This is obviously a pinnacle of theatrical fashion. For me, it's borderline offensive, but who am I to speak? So Galliano introduced the Sphinx line. The clothes kind of speak for themselves. They're obviously insane because it's haute couture and he can do whatever he wants. But yeah, we had elongated tights, attenuated silhouettes. We had luxurious fabrics and gold leaf. really beautiful silver lame, coral beadings, and yeah, this collection was really lavish. Gucci, Fall Winter '04 by Tom Ford, presented in February. This show was a final show for Tom Ford at Gucci, and it was a retrospective celebration of all of the stuff that he did for Gucci. What he did for Gucci was he revolutionized the brand, transforming it from a struggling luxury house to a global fashion powerhouse. He revitalized the image of the brand, created the Gucci lifestyle. Um, basically Gucci was recognizable anywhere without actually seeing the label. I mean, his contributions were so significant that the brand's value skyrocketed by like $10 million, which is insane. The theme of the show was obviously a curated journey through his most iconic designs, reimagined a little bit for obviously the big final show. The blue velvet jackets from 1995 appeared, the crystal embellished gown, reminiscent of Nicole Kidman's 2003 Met Gala appearance, and this retrospective approach underscored the evolution of Ford's aesthetic from bold sexuality to refined elegance. Suits and jackets were obviously meticulously constructed in the show. There were rushed detailing and complex paneling that accentuated the body's contours, which is really his thing. A rich tapestry of materials, including dye fox, crocodile, and suede. He's not a sustainable queen. That showed, the opulence, his opulence. There were a lot of gowns with beautiful silhouettes, adorned with sequins and complemented by dramatic stoles. Um, it was basically all concluding Ford's signature glamour. The runway itself is really interesting because it was just basically pink fur all over the floor. Finally, the final show we're going to talk about is Undercover Fashion Winter '04 by Jun Takahashi. The show is called The But Beautiful and was presented in March 2004. This really tickles my fancy. The show really tickles my fancy. It was a moment of wear and tear, which I really love about clothing. It really encapsulates the distinctive fusion of punk sensibility, poetic deconstruction, and narrative depth. So, Takahashi drew inspiration from the androgynous and layered style of punk icon Patti Smith, obviously, and he used it as a foundation to explore how clothing evolves over time. The collection delved into the personal analysis of how clothes age, and they soften, they become more personalized, and it reflects the wearer's experience. um, the narrative was further enriched by the incorporation of handcrafted elements, and he collaborated with a few artists, which emphasized the uniqueness and individuality that was embedded in each piece. The little accessories were really inspired by the artist Anne Valérie Dupont, especially the little stuffed charms resembling medals and keys. The really nice detail that I really appreciated in the show were the little buttons that were kind of mismatched, which I assume represented, when you lose a button on a shirt, you replace it. And it really gave a personal touch. This is it for the first episode of Fashion in 5. I hope you really enjoyed it because I did. And yeah, hope you have a great day. Bye.